Hi, welcome to Write More Light. My name is Sarah, coming from the Midwest Writing Center. I am so pumped to be here today with Becca Klaver, one of my favorite poets. And it's like we know each other a little bit on a as human beings, and I still can't say her name without saying her last name, because that's how cool I think she is. So it's going to be a really awesome experience, at least for me, but probably for everyone. And as usual, we're going to do the interview. We'll talk about current events at the Midwest Writing Center, and then we'll launch into a free write. Thank you so much for being here, Becca.
Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
I hope you didn't know any of that until just now.
Well, you said my last name correctly, long A. So it's good that
That's
if you're saying my full name, you're saying it correctly. That's all that really matters.
I like that. I'm gonna say that someday if this should ever happen to me. If you're ready, we can dive in.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Just kidding. I have things to say still. So I have you here in celebration of National Poetry Month, which is just how the month that we dedicate to poetry, the way we dedicate a month to anything, right? And I want to talk about why poetry is so great and why it deserves its own month. I'm also going to ask you to do that. Sorry, that was me realizing that I didn't prepare as well as I thought I did, because this is not my primary work computer. First, I'm going to read your bio, and then I'm going to ask you to maybe read to us.
Mm-hmm.
Yay, thanks. I think that this will be useful in establishing that you are, in fact, the perfect man for this job.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Becca Klaver is a writer, teacher, editor, and literary collaboration conjurer. Oh, I love that. She's the author of the poetry collection LA Liminal, Empire Wasted, and Ready for the World, as well as several chapbooks. Midwinter Constellations, a book co-written with 31 poets, all in homage to Bernadette Meyer's Midwinter Day, will be published in 2022 by Black Lawrence Press. As an editor, she co-founded the feminist poetry press Switchback Books, is currently co-editing the anthology Electric Girlesque, and has launched various pop-up journals and websites, including Women Poets Wearing Sweatpants, a collection of original poetry memes, and Across the Social Distances, a journal of early pandemic poetry. She's also co-host of the podcast Real Housewives of Bohemia. Born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Becca is the Robert P. Dana Director of the Center for Literary Arts at Cornell College, and lives in Iowa City. Now, do you have anything you would like to share with us?
Well, I'm here in Iowa City now, and the illusion that we're maybe sitting across the table from one another is just an illusion, but we did decide to sit outside for this session because it's 77 degrees in Iowa right now. What's going on?
It's so nice. But did you bring any poetry for us? Sorry.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell me what to read. You want me to choose?
I mean, I trust you, yeah, but I don't think there's anything of yours that I've read and been like, not that one.
Okay. I will read
my table of contents for that book is just so I write on my table of I only painted one hand. My table of contents in poetry books or essay collections or whatever, I marked my favorites, and it's just like heart, star, line, heart, heart,
Aww.
3 hearts, star, and I these all mean different things, but they're pretty much meaningless if it's all of them.
Yeah, what's the difference between a heart and a star?
It's a feeling.
Yeah. There are little stars all over this book. That's what I use for section dividers, like a little star. You see that? Yeah.
Perfect.
So why don't I read the first poem from the book because I think it sort of like speaks to this moment of sitting outside and talking to you on an iPad clamped to a table. So there's a poem for that, and it's called The Woods. The Woods. I never go to the woods anymore, but when I go to the woods, I remember how to burn things at water's edge. If I never go to the woods again, I'll live to die another, die to live another day. In the woods, I just fan myself out among the mosses, place my laptop gingerly on a stump, set a timer for the webcam, hug a tree, and a squirrel comes to visit me. Could I ever really live and love in the woods? I muse, grinding my cigarette beneath the bower. What is the sorrow sound of this wood? The creek or the crickets? In the woods, I see my sisters. They are there and there and there, walking in figure eights with their hands full. I dance around them, little pyro with a lust for making, lugging logs to the fire. This has been The Woods.
Thank you so much. I want to give, I remembered because it feels a little bit, I don't think I've seen an outdoor Zoom meeting yet. And so I felt a little bit like I was watching a video, you know, and I want to give a shout out to your Ready for the World Instagram account. It, for those who are unfamiliar, Becca has an Instagram account in which she performs in really cool and weird ways the poems in that book that she just read from.
Yeah, I guess maybe just watching me read it on Zoom is a little less fun than watching me read it with an Instagram filter. But yeah, this book came out at like the worst and the best time because it came out like basically just as the pandemic debuted as well. And but it was also this book about like living on the internet and also kind of like trying to like get back to the woods or like get back to the elemental in some ways. So it's like all of a sudden like all I could do was like wander around by myself in the woods to like, you know, stay sane or amused last spring, and still, or, you know, be online to try to connect to people. So yeah,
I mean, I'm sure it's a terrible way to release a book. But there's this Roseanne Cash, I think, quote where she says, I think books find their way to you when you need them. And I felt very much that way when I sat down with this book. I was like very sad and sitting in a garden, and I was like, oh, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing right now. So let me just get real confessional here. I'm gonna dig in. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Also like very, very sad and sitting in a garden. Definitely a mood that this book approves of. So yeah, thanks.
It was
for sharing
also that. Like I read with a pen in hand, right? And I was like, I don't have any pens here. What am I doing? And I had to like search the yard. It was kind of awesome. Like looking
like
back, it
smeared some dirt.
It definitely has dirt in it, my copy. So I was gonna be like, I'm gonna start with some soft ones, but for artists, this is not really probably an easy question. So whatever, we're digging in, right? How did you find poetry and fall in love with it and start writing it?
Yeah. I have like sort of what was the last thing?
Just a little small question.
Just a little tiny question. I think I found poetry in middle school, so like pretty early. Although I do remember writing like poems in elementary school, like learning forms, like whatever, like, you know, use one of the five senses in each of these 5 lines, like the kind of forms they teach you when you're really young. Like I remember like the little notebook I had where I would like try to do things like that, but it didn't really do that much for me until I was like in middle school, junior high, having a lot of feelings, you know. Like, I think, yeah, it was once like I had that experience of like, oh my God, my body is full of feelings. What am I going to do with them? That must have been like totally hormonal. That's when I really needed poetry. And it wasn't just like, I know how to write in this little form. So yeah. And I also had a friend in middle school who wrote poems, and I didn't really I didn't know like what it really meant to write poems. And so reading hers and then realizing like, oh, every poem doesn't have to rhyme, and like all that sort of like early stuff you learn, and what a poem could do. I think that was part of it too. And maybe I was a little envious, like maybe I wanted to be able to do what she was doing. So yeah.
That's so real. I get really excited about writing when I find someone who's really exceptional, but I kind of feel the opposite about poetry. Like I will never be able to do that, and I'm just gonna observe and sit here in awe. Just
Poets,
actually terrible
I feel like poets are so grateful for readers who don't consider themselves poets, because it feels very rare that we have those readers, like besides just people who know me or whatever, like my BFF from back in the day. Well, actually, she's sort of like my best reader. She'll like read my books and like text me her comments as she goes. Like she gives me the most thorough responses to my books. But yeah, to have people who are not poets pay attention to your work is sadly a rarity as poets, but it's awesome when it happens.
I think this is like not, I don't know, maybe it is important. We're here to talk about poetry. I think the issue with non-writers reading poetry is that I don't know who I'm speaking for.
Pretty sure you're a writer.
I'm also somebody who definitely already reads. But it doesn't seem accessible, I think. We read like, hi puppy. The neighbor's dog said hello. We don't, when we're reading in high school, we read, old dead guys, and they use, crazy language that you can't really understand. And I think that we just expect that all poetry is going to be a workout and not a fun one. Again, yeah, the we is just not actually true of me, but I think that that's kind of like the biggest issue, right? Because great poetry is so accessible and is universal and speaks to you, for you, with you.
Yeah, I think about that a lot, both as a writer and as a teacher, because I really want my poems to be accessible. Like I want them to be graspable on the first read on some level, but obviously I don't want to either, so, but I am always thinking about like how to strike that balance, like how to make this legible, approachable, but still do what I want it to do. So yeah, some people don't like to think about audience. Diane DePrima once told me when I asked her a question in a class visit that thinking about audience
no big deal.
Black magic. I know. No, this is like one of my best stories. I'm just like casually dropping it, but yeah, she says thinking about audience is black magic. I was asking her about revolutionary letters, which she wrote for underground newspapers, and she read like on the steps of City Hall in San Francisco and on the backs of flatbed trucks, and like she would put this in her bio that she did these things. And so I was taking this class at the CUNY Graduate Center, and she was visiting our class, and like it was like maybe her last trip to New York ever. I'm not totally sure, but she was doing this big reading, and it was also organized by our professor. So that's why she was visiting our class. And so I was asking her about revolutionary letters and how she thought about audience, just sort of thinking it was like an obvious question that of course she was thinking about audience if she had like this actual, sort of countercultural audience that she was writing to or performing to. And she just like hated the question, like just shot me down so hard and said, thinking about audience is black magic. And I know what she means, because like on some level when you're composing, you do, hope for some sort of like channeling or some sort of like receptive mode. But yeah, maybe, and maybe thinking about audience at that moment would be black magic on a poem. But eventually I think about audience.
I mean, I would think so if you want to have one. But I don't understand that at all. Like
I mean, neither. I've been like puzzling over it for 10 plus years now. Yeah.
black magic is bad, but you did use the word magic. So
Right.
actually, that is the best segue.
Yes.
So I know that I've taken at least one class from you. Shout out to Iowa City Poetry and the Iowa Writers House for that. So I know that you've taught on, you think about the intersection of spirituality and art. And I think that there's got to be like a very delicate and precise magic to getting words just so. But what can you tell us a little bit about what that intersection looks like for you, and or why it's important?
Yeah. I think about this in a bunch of different ways. I feel like because poetry is mostly taught in colleges and universities, or just, inside like large institutions, it gets presented as this one kind of thing, or like as we were talking about in high school, it gets presented as this thing that's like, very limited, which is like mostly 100-year-old poems by white men. And but even, in an academic setting where you're reading awesome contemporary poetry, you're talking about craft, and you're talking about maybe like what you would borrow from the author. And this is how I teach too, so it's not like there's anything wrong with that. But I think teaching in community settings like at Midwest Writing Center long ago, not that long ago, and then through Iowa City Poetry and Iowa Writers House here in the last few years, like that's one thing Iowa has really given to me, these opportunities to teach in community settings. And I think one of the things I ended up doing with it is just sort of deciding like, okay, like I want to let in all of these things that poetry is for me, outside of just kind of more academic questions. And, that means like teaching poetry more as like a contemplative or meditative practice in some ways. It means teaching poetry for healing. The workshop I did at the Midwest Writing Center was Poetry and Me Too. So it was basically like trying to use trauma theory to think about like what poetry can offer that narrative and storytelling can't. I think there's like a huge emphasis when people talk about healing and writing to talk about narrative and like wholeness, and that is kind of the end goal. And I think maybe for some people that's what you need. So I'm not like trying to dismiss that at all. But I think for a lot of people, like what writing and trauma can do for each other is like hold, what poetry can do anyway, is like hold silences and like ruptures and stutters and like all these things that can't be like swept up into a coherent narrative and tied up really neatly. And so, again, it's not to say like narrative isn't useful or like a feeling of wholeness isn't useful, but yeah, I really want to like come out on the side of like, maybe you're not there yet, or maybe you'll never be there, and poetry can be this other thing for healing, which is sort of like allowing you to be as fragmented, or your stories to be as fragmented as they need to be, in order to I guess accurately represent what that experience is like. So yeah. So that's sort of like mental health and poetry, maybe less speaking to the spirituality question. But probably in ideas of fragment and wholeness, there's a spiritual question too.
I think I would be really surprised if someone would argue with me about this, but it's possible. But I think all art is a holistic practice, right? Not singular in any way to like just one part of your body or brain.
Yeah.
And I think I liked that answer.
Thanks.
So something else that I've noticed when seeing you as a teacher is it seems like you have an endless supply of like tricks and tools in your back pocket. What are some of your favorites when you're teaching or feeling
Tricks and
stuck?
tools? Like, do I?
I mean, I can give you examples of things I've gotten from you, but I'm just wondering like what tools you would
Will
give.
you tell me one? So then I
inspiring.
know what you tell me one thing you've gotten, and then I'll know what you're getting at, and I'll try to think of more.
Dream journal and planting things and senses.
Right. Yeah. Right. So
It's like, wait, I do this stuff.
yeah, I know. That's like how my mind works. I'm sort of like, what is it? And then yeah, because I think all of those little prompts and things come like really specifically out of whatever text is in front of me. So I think that's my teacher brain, that when I read something, I don't necessarily even think about like what this is going to do for my own writing, but like, ooh, when I'm reading Poetry Is Not a Luxury by Audre Lorde, where are all these arrows pointing? Like what could we do to actually put into practice what she's saying? Because like in that essay, she's sort of she's like making all of these suggestions about like getting in touch with feeling and with the unconscious, but there's no like programmatic way to do that. And of course there shouldn't be, but there are a million ways you might try to do that. So in that class, I was trying to think about getting in touch with the unconscious. I also, last year in my intro to creative writing class at Cornell, had my students keep dream journals. I always ask the intro students to keep, to just do daily writing, like 15 minutes a day. And so this one block, I had them do dream journals, and like something happened when I had them do the dream journals. I mean, first of all, when I asked them to talk about like how it was going within a day or two, they were all telling me how like they knew how to lucid dream, and like they all seemed to have like these dream superpowers that I was not expecting at all. And I don't know if this is like because internet or whatever, like this is not like a thing people like did or talked about when I was in college. But yeah, all of these young writers seem to, or like a significant chunk, like maybe a third of the class, had all these lucid dreaming anecdotes. And yeah, I was just sort of feeling like, right, like there is something when you're letting the unconscious into your writing practice, like there might be something that like sort of gets like unscrewed or released, like something could come up from below. So yeah, that was one. And what was the other one you mentioned?
We planted things.
Oh, right. We planted things. Like, did you ever dig them up?
Okay, I wrote. I'm very upset. I used like lentils or split peas or something.
Oh yeah.
And I wrote on the sides like water on Wednesdays and what day I could dig them up, which I don't remember. But last week or the week before, my spouse was cleaning the garage where I still had stuff because we just moved here. And I was like, but where are my planters? And he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I have little pots and they had lentils in them. And he was like, they're in the backyard now, empty.
No. Oh no. Well, that means your wishes have dispersed. And who knows? Who knows what life,
I'm very upset.
What flight they're taking.
However, now maybe they will take root. They're apparently in this garden behind me.
Yeah, right. Who knows what's going to happen? It sort of reminds me of like when you let go a bunch of helium balloons with messages on them when you're a kid. Did you do that? I remember doing that. like the school parking lot or something. It's like, all right, there it goes. Actually, that would be a fun poetry project. Write little poems and tie them to helium balloons. Needs a budget though.
I'm thinking.
Yeah, I know. Midwest
Thinking
Writing
the-
Center. It's outdoor, potentially socially distant. Yeah.
We could make little paper sailboats, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. So yeah, I think, you know, with the Audre Lorde class, it was a lot about like, how do we come up with like one set of strategies for like, putting these ideas into practice? And poetry is not a luxury, and that sort of led me into well, we did talk about Diana Prima in that class too. It led me into like thinking about ideas of like the image as magic, and yeah, the senses. I think that part of the magic of poetry is the way that sensory experience is invoked. So like we know when you're dreaming or imagining that your brain is firing in really similar ways to the way it would if you were like actually having that experience. Actually, but so I think, yeah, I think poetry, you know, prose too, but poetry tends to do it in a kind of like more efficient way. Poetry is a way to kind of like allow yourself to be transported in a way that is sort of magical, because it's tricking your brain into thinking something else is happening than what's right in front of you. So yeah, maybe that seems really basic, but to me, that's like the root of magic and poetry's role in magic. Just like talking to each other in two different cities on a screen. Once seemed like science fiction. So I think I feel the same way about technology.
it does.
Yeah.
I definitely thought I invented the camera phone when I was like 4. So someone else do it. I want to say I really didn't want to do any kind of dream journaling. And I don't know that my writing went anywhere for it, but I did it. I put in a good faith effort. And the reason is because I have nightmares, and I think it's a side effect of a medication. People always ask me like, what do you mean you have nightmares? What is psychologically wrong with you? And I'm like, I'm pretty sure nothing that causes my nightmares. I'm sure plenty is wrong with me. But as I started, you know, I don't want to remember them, right? And as I started documenting them, I noticed there was a theme consistently. I would always try to get myself out of the bad situation. Like I would wake me up or like pull a fire alarm. And so that was
empowering.
Yeah. Like I'm just chilling in my dream, taking care of me.
That's
and I
right.
also, with you said about the brain, is still experiencing things. I've been recently, because of the nightmare thing, tracking my sleep, and you can tell from like my heart rate, my fancy watch, when I'm dreaming, because my heart rate is way higher. And that's so interesting. Our bodies are really cool, and this has nothing to do with poetry.
No, but it's true that REM sleep, when you're dreaming, people think like, some people think that's like your deepest sleep, but it's actually like your most active sleep. It's like your most like how you are when you're awake. Yeah.
It's wild.
And now we have technology to prove it.
So you started the Across the Social Distances last year, and that was a short-lived project. Can you tell me a bit about why it started and why it ended when it did, and also the kind of work you were receiving?
Yeah. I started it because I was having just sort of anxious reactions. I mean, as I think many of us probably were, we were like suddenly stuck online. And I was scrolling the news of the day. It was always pretty bad news, especially bad. Everyone was having such a hard time. And so yeah, I just had this feeling of like going to social media to connect and then really feeling like I couldn't handle it. And so I guess I just wanted to create a space for myself. And then also I hoped others might want to be in that space too, where we could, I mean, there were poems about the pandemic, so it's not like we were avoiding it, but maybe we could have like a different experience, like a different quality of experience than like whatever sensationalism the algorithm was trying to feed us. And so, yeah, I created, as I often do, a little free Tumblr site with the early pandemic poetry on it. And yeah, these pop-up journals are just something I kind of do. Like I have this idea for what I want to respond to, and I want to respond to it instantly. And so the internet is good for that. Tumblr is free. And then the moment kind of passes and I sort of feel like with across the social distances, it was mostly that the number of submissions just started kind of slowing down. Like there was a moment where there was like an explosion of submissions, and then it slowed to a trickle, and the work I was getting was, I don't know, just like didn't have like the same, not intensity. It was like we had passed into a different chapter basically of the pandemic. We were mid-pandemic all of a sudden. And so I realized that like what this journal was a response to that early moment when social media and like scrolling the feed just really felt too intense, and I wanted an alternative. And I wanted to see like how people were feeling beyond, like what their experiences were like beyond what you get when you scroll social media. So yeah, I think that's my motivation for a lot of projects. Like the false intimacy of social media can be so dissatisfying when you're like really craving more than that.
That was, damn, I was gonna say that was really good timing. The dog just stopped barking. Um,
And then as soon as you turn the mic back on, now this is good. This is how we prove we're really outside and not just with
I don't know. I've
the
seen a
Zoom
FedEx truck
background.
drive behind you so many times.
I know. I know. I'm sort of like, did I get something? Or yeah, I feel like the FedEx truck is my my like
It's
my
definitely
Instagram
true,
filter for this video. What does it mean? What does
Joe.
it mean?
What changes have you seen in yourself, in poetry at large, or in your students over the last year, if any?
Yeah. I mean, I just think we always need poetry more at moments like this. And I think poetry is always there for us. You know, one of the reasons I love poetry so much is because it can be so many things and it can serve so many purposes. And, you know, as we were talking about earlier, it can be more of an intellectual exercise, it can be more of an emotional or spiritual practice. And so, yeah, I think that poetry is sort of there to greet you or to accompany you, whatever you're going through. And, you know, I remember this happening like post 9/11, and it definitely happened during the pandemic. Like all of a sudden, people were reading poetry again. And then there was Amanda Gorman, and people seemed to realize poets existed. So that was cool. Yeah. Yeah.
I have more questions, but we promised to talk about National Poetry Month and National Poetry Writing Month. Can you walk me through that?
Yeah. So
If you need.
What'd you say?
I can be more specific with my questions if you need.
I'll just say some things, and then if I'm not saying what you want me to say, I'll say some other things. So yeah, National Poetry Month and National Poetry Writing Month are both April, but they mean two different things. I don't know if the Academy of American Poets started National Poetry Month. I'm not sure, but like basically it's just like a month to honor poetry, and sometimes like places will have more poetry readings during that time or whatever. And then NaPoWriMo, which is National Poetry Writing Month, is something that was started in, I think, the early aughts by a poet, Maureen Thorson. And she just started independently. And if you go to naporimo.net, you can see a little more about the history of it. But basically, it's like NaNoWriMo, where you write a novel in the month of November, but in the month of April, you write a poem a day. And so I have been doing that like on public blogs or secret blogs or just privately for myself for, I don't know, over a decade now. So April is always this month where I feel really extra connected to poetry, and yeah, it's a fun practice. I mean, some people do write a poem every day, like, but for me, like a month is a sustainable amount of time to try to write a poem a day. And you know, April doesn't always line up with like a great time in life to do that, and so it's also like the challenge of figuring out like how could I do this anyway. And you know, so some people just like to do fragments or haiku, or you know, write like a poem in sections or something like that. So like whatever makes it possible. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Perfect. So what does a healthy output then look like for you? A poem a day seems like a ton. I know with like novel writing month, they go by word count or pages. But poetry doesn't work the way prose does.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think a poem a day can be a couplet a day. You know, it can be a tiny little fragment, and that is fine. So I don't know, but I do feel like I get a lot of the poems that end up in books out of that practice. And so it's like, even if you're not writing something decent every day, by being in the practice of it, something good will come, or a few good things will come. Like the spells in this book were almost all written. It was April 2015. I did a spell a day, and I took requests for, you know, things people wanted, like headaches and things like that. So yeah, spell a day, poem a day, or whatever you want a day.
I know it sounds maybe to someone else kind of trite to be like, well, you know, you're gonna get the really quality stuff from this time, but it's just true that like the more you write, the more quality you're gonna be coming up with. Just it's at a certain point, it's a numbers game.
Totally. Yeah. And it would be nice if regular life allowed you to like immerse yourself in poetry that deeply. Other times of the year, I have done it. Like I wrote something every day in August last year, and then the derecho came August 10th, and I was sort of like, okay, now it's a different kind of poem. So it's also like the way the world works its way in when you're doing that daily practice is always really interesting too, because I think when you're writing every day, whatever is happening in the environment, like your local environment or the larger political environment or the weather, you know, tends to sort of make its way in more. And those are the kinds of poems that I love the best, that let the everyday in. So yeah.
So what I'm hearing, and this is a no pressure environment for what it's worth, I always, my number one piece of writing advice is like, you cannot get stressed about it or it won't happen. So please hear that in what I'm about to ask. What I'm hearing is that you don't write every day as a universal rule. So how do you balance that with, you know, actively publishing work and running the Literary Arts Center, the Center for Literary Arts, and you know, having a life on top of that? What is the secret here?
Yeah, well, I do write every day. I just don't write poetry every day. So I journal every day, and I think that I'm probably like writing poems in my journal entries like more than I really think I am at the time, you know. So I'm at least sort of like staying in touch with language.
My
and
dad,
like
my dad used to, my sister and I would listen to Ani DeFranco, and he would always be like, "Why are you listening to this girl just reading her diary?" Um, and instead of getting the message that he didn't like it, what I heard was, I can get quality out of a journal entry. Um, so I'm glad you said that. And also,
I,
you know, I guess Ani DeFranco is on our level.
totally. And like when I was a teenager, I was in love with Anais Nin's writing, like diary writers are some of my favorite writers. And yeah, I think like the specificity of dailiness and like actually getting the texture of people's lives, whether that's in diaries or letters or Instagram stories or or poems. That's what I'm after more than, a thing called a poem.
I love that you used the word texture. I think that that's a really beautiful point about having a daily practice, right? I had a friend who is a professional arts photographer, right? And she did a project where she just took her good camera out, right, not her phone, and just took a picture every day. And it became this whole project of hers, and it was gorgeous and interesting. And I think that we don't see that so much in like writing that's available to consume other people's writing, because writing goes through such a rigorous revision process, and has so many filters on how it changes between conception and conception and consumption, and the way that you're understanding it when you consume it. But I think it is certainly out there, and we're just not understanding it to that degree, right?
Totally. And I think I definitely learned the practice of dailiness from the New York School of Poets, so that's a place for people to turn. Also, if you want to watch a bunch of poets write poems every day in real time and kind of track what it looks like, the Bloof Books website, the blog there is full of poem drafts by Bloof Poets and Friends. So yeah, I think it's just bloofbooks.com/blog. And
Blue book.
Yeah, Bloof. So it's BLOOF books.com/blog. And the drafts are going up all day, all night long, all April. So that might be fun if anyone's interested in kind of seeing what NaPoWriMo looks like or getting inspired.
I love that. And I love that you're just handing out resources. That's awesome. I also love that the sun is coming. What did I leave out? What are we missing?
What are we missing?
Yeah, just to put you on the spot. I mean, I think it's really great. One of the reasons I wanted you to read at the beginning, when I do have guests, I often have them read at the end because that seems like the normal way to do it. But I really wanted to start out with a clear appreciation for poetry, and like that's why we're here. That's why we have. Thank you, by the way. That's why we have you.
Thank you.
And so that's my purpose today, is making it clear that like poetry is there to be loved and appreciated and wrestled with. But is there anything that maybe you wanted to say that I missed? I get that sometimes when I interview people, they're like, hey, but I didn't get to say this.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've gotten to say what I've wanted to say. I'm trying to think if I should read.
Always.
I'll read a spell. I didn't read a spell, so I think I will read one more from Ready for the World. And it's a short spell that I think will be a good segue into a writing prompt. That might not be what's happening exactly next, but pretty soon. So it's called Spell for Actualizing Art. Be a child before the internet. Make. Need not be material. Try beats on wall. Conversation. Arrangement or delay. So hopefully that will help someone actualize some art out there.
I love that so much. That is a really special book. Yeah, okay. I can get to updates with Midwest Writing Center. I am guessing there's a couple of folks who are gonna dip out from hanging out with us now. And if that is the case, you're missing out on a dope writing prompt. And of course, please write more light into your life. Now, what's up at the Midwest Writing Center? So very exciting. We have a National Poetry Month reading. It'll be online. That's our next Spectra event, 4/22. And that'll be featuring the folks who have participated in our Dead Poets Espresso National Poetry Month event. We are doing Writer Studio still on Zoom every first and third Saturday of the month, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Time. Quint City Poets meets on Wednesday evenings, I think the first Wednesday of the month. I was gonna write down, but I didn't. But that information is all on our website and on Facebook. May 25th, we're gonna have our first outdoor Spectra event. I'm sorry, May 22nd. I don't know if I just said 21st. It'll be May 22nd. It'll be at Roz Talks. It's going to be really great. We'll be announcing the lineup here very soon.
Roz Talks is open again?
It's outdoor.
Nice. It's a great thing.
We've got the conference is coming up end of June. That is going to be a really, really, really dope lineup. I am not sure if I'm announcing that officially yet, so just be on the lookout. It's really like when I remember it, I get really giddy. It's really great. The Young Emerging Writers Internship is accepting applications through May 15th. That is for young writers age 15 to 19. And we also, it'll be mostly online like it was last year, but if internet or tech accessibility is an issue for you, that should not stop you from being part of the internship. So please let us know and we will make it happen if you are chosen. Of course, we've got Write More Light every Tuesday and Thursday at 1 p.m. Central Time. We've got some good ones coming up. We've got the calendar for April posted. May will be up soon. And go check out Dead Poets Espresso in Moline. It's right by the river, right by the Mark, in the John Deere Pavilion. And it's featuring some beautiful local poets on their paintings. Pretty cool. Thank you for listening. Now we'll get into that free write. Did you have something in mind for that?
Well, let's collaborate a bit because I was thinking about that like elementary school assignment that I still kind of love, which is to use all 5 senses in a poem. But I think I'm imagining maybe something like where you have lines with the senses in them, images evoking the senses in them, but then like they're interspersed with some other kind of line, maybe like something more inward versus outward. I don't know.
I love this.
Wanna,
so like one line is a sense, like see, hear, smell, touch, taste, and then yeah, the next line can just be the meowing got louder.
I did hear it that time.
he found the open window rather than the closed door. There's a metaphor there. Yeah, and then what 2 lines in response, just something like personal going on, and then another line for a sense. So that ends up being what, 15 lines?
Yeah, or even just every other line kind of like going inward and outward. But yeah, whatever you can sandwich between the senses lines, whatever you have time for.
And also, of
course,
we're encouraging poetry because it is National Poetry Month and Becca is a kick-ass poet. But if that doesn't sit right with you, if that's not feeling right, of course, it's always okay to journal. or write whatever comes. So I'm going to set my timer, which no longer makes a loud noise and makes me jump out of my skin for 5 minutes. And Becca, I don't know if you know this, I occasionally, when I think of something I think is useful to say out loud, I will. So like, don't feel like you have to be silent.
Okay.
5 minutes. Let's write more light.
Let's do it.
So just sort of by accident, I'm listing senses and gonna format it later, I guess, because that's how I started. I'd also like to say, as you are compiling senses in any format, that's a useful thing to put into the seed journal that I talk about a lot. Taste always trips me up.
I don't know if you can hear it, but the chainsaws are starting again. That's the whole Iowa 2020, 2021 sound.
I don't hear them on your end, but I hear them on my end.
Oh, really? Yeah, like derecho cleanup still happening.
I also have hammering over here.
Yeah. I don't hear that.
And it's pretty far away. We've only got like 20 seconds left. So I'm gonna call it.
Okay.
Oh, I was exactly right. Thank you so much, Becca.
Thank you
To
so much.
everyone else, I encourage you to go buy and read her books. And they will. I should have brought mine out, but normally I have just everything accessible from my desk and didn't really think about it. They
No
will end up
worries.
as beat up and loved as mine. I am sure of it. Um, thank you so much for being here. Please always be around and keep writing.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Midwest Writing Center. Hey, Ryan.
And yeah, as always, write more light into your life.